Well, hello. Joining me today is John Cameron. John has had a wide and varied career as a composer, conductor, arranger, musician, and songwriter. John's written over 50 film scores, an Oscar nomination for A Touch of Class, a movie some of you may remember, with George Segal and Glenda Jackson. His first film score, 1969's, uh, make sure I'm pronouncing this right, Kess. Is that
One
right?
of my first, yeah.
Okay, one of your
First majors.
first major, okay, is one of the top rated British films of the 20th century. So welcome, John.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and let's go back, take a trip in the Wayback Machine, I guess,
Yeah.
and back to the beginning if we can, dust off some of those cobwebs.
Yep.
Um, and now, where did it all start? Where were you born?
I
All
was
of that.
born in Woodford, Essex, during an air raid, 1944, and I was raised all over London until we eventually moved out to Surrey when I was about 8 or 9. I went to school at a Wallington County Grammar School. You know, I had a great time there. My dad played fiddle. He was a semi-pro musician before the war. He'd loved to have been pro, but he had aged parents to look after, so he went into advertising. But he kept playing. He played something between kind of Stefan Grappelli and Joe Venuti on jazz fiddle, but at the same time he loved to play Mozart and he loved to play tangos and things like that. I think from him I got the idea that there was no boundaries in music. You could play what the hell you liked. And in fact, my mum played piano in a kind of Fats Waller style. And I think actually they were about the only parents in the street who approved of rock and roll when it came along. It was quite weird. Everybody else's parents would go, "Oh, it's terrible." I love it, you know.
That's great. That's great. You know, you had that encouragement, and you think that you picked up the piano from your mother then?
Well, I learned classical piano from the age of 6, but then I had a eureka moment at about 11, I think it was. I was in a music store buying some music, and I asked the guy for, have you got Beethoven Opus 13, the C minor Pathétique? And my mum said, and have you got I Saw Mummy Kissing Santa Claus? And I looked at her, daggers, you know, what? So anyway, I got back home and I thought, well, every time they have a party, my mum pitches up on the piano, Dad gets his fiddle out, everybody starts singing and dancing. I want a piece of this. So there was a song around at the time called "Singing the Blues" that Tommy Steele had a hit with and Guy Mitchell had a hit.
Right.
And I kind of started to mess about on the piano. Yeah, I've never felt more than singing the blues, 'cause I never thought that I'd ever lose. And that was it. I was hooked, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And my dad, he was not just a fiddle player. He played terrible piano, but it's all by ear. And he played all the standards, all the sort of jazz standards, and you know the 40s and 30s and whatever stuff, shows, tunes, whatever. Usually in the wrong key.
Okay.
And he taught me all these things, and so by the time I was 14, I'd made my semi-professional start in music in the Duke's Head, Croydon, playing the piano twice a week with a guitar player and a drummer, and accompanying everybody who came up and said, "I want to sing Ticka Ticka Timing." You're going, "Okay, what key?" I said, "Oh, I don't know, that one," you know.
Was that like the beginning of skiffle, or was that a few years later?
We'd done skiffle when I
Okay.
was about 12 or 13. We had a skiffle group at the local youth club. Used to meet on Wednesdays and Sunday night after church. Classic skiffle group. There was me on guitar, somebody on t-shirt bass, which consisted of going do do do, and about 14 people on washboards, you know. So, a good friend of mine mastered all the Everly Brothers stuff as well, you know, the harmony stuff. So yeah, we had the skiffle bit.
The things that you could get away with.
Oh yeah,
That
absolutely. Then I got onto rock and roll more than skiffle. I had to give up to do my O levels exams at 15, and I stayed playing. And then I went up to Cambridge on a history exhibition. I'd wanted to take A level music, but the school I was at didn't have anybody to teach me A level music. And I said, I'll do it myself. You know, by this time I'd got all the grades from the Royal Academy and whatever. No, you can't do it. If the school can't teach you, you're not allowed to do it. So I went up to Cambridge on a history exhibition. And while I was there, I started playing with the jazz club, with some great British jazz players like Ronnie Ross, Danny Moss, Art Thiemann, Dick Hextall-Smith, Bobby Wellens, Kathy Stober. I mean, just a plethora of fabulous jazz players. So suddenly, I'm thrown into this whole jazz thing, and I'd always played a lot of blues as well, and I also got involved with the Footlights Club. You know where Monty Python and Beyond the Fringe, all that lot come from.
right. Wasn't there a picture of Eric Idle? Right? Was he in that?
Yeah,
Eric
yeah.
Idle? Yeah, yeah.
There is a picture of Eric and me doing a number called "I Want to Hold Your Handle," which was the Beatles singing the Hallelujah chorus. It's great actually because we had it running on first off Broadway, then on Broadway with the Cambridge Circus Show, which was the gang that had come through Footlights a couple of years before us with John Cleese and all that bunch, and every sort of couple of weeks in the Footlights Club, where we used to go most of the evenings, there'd be a little blue envelope on the thing to Eric and I, which was our royalties, which we which actually kept us in you know, very comfortable whatever for the last year or so at Cambridge. So
well, that's what I was going to say. Well, at least you did get some royalties. You know, a lot of musicians and
I know,
you know, at the time or even later
yeah,
couldn't. You know.
I know. No, we were lucky. So about halfway through Cambridge, I went to the master and I said, "Look, I'm working every vacation as a pro musician. I played with Ronnie Rand Big Band and with the Colin Hume Orchestra in Birmingham. I'm doing all this jazz club stuff. I'm writing string quartets for the music clubs up here. I'm a musician. Can I please do finals in music?" And the guy said, "Yeah." And, you know. So the great thing was that the final year in music in Cambridge is almost all composition and a bit of history. But it really is what I wanted to do. So I had a great year. I had a marvellous director of studies called Peter Tranquil, he'd written music for the West End stage before the war. So he was sympathetic to what I was trying to do. When I went to see David Wilcott to get permission to do the course, he looked at my portfolio and said, "Well, if you work very hard, you might get a third." Okay, that's red rag to a bull, you know. But it was great because it meant I could write. This guy, Peter Tranquil, he had a great way of not telling you what you should write or not write. I used to write things that were somewhere between Hindemith and Charlie Mingus. And he'd take one look at it and go, "No, I like that, but I tell you what, if you took that line you got on the middle horn and put it down in the bass, you might find it." And you go, "Yeah, I like that." You know, he taught me deconstruction and
Kind of as a guide, he kind of helped guide you.
yeah. So he was a great impetus into the next stage. So then I came down from Cambridge, and Eric and I did cabaret for a bit. In the
How was that?
it was all right, you know. I wasn't quite set up for cabaret. I wanted to be a musician, so we'd done a bit of it and we'd enjoyed it. And I did the Blue Angel and I did the room upstairs for the Royal Court. But then I got a gig through David Frost, of all people, at a place called the Take One, which was in St Martin's Lane, which was a supper club, and the the band there was Ronnie Ross, who I'd played with up in Cambridge, Bill Lesage, I think it was Art Ellefson on saxophone as well, Spike Heatley and Tony Carr. And I got a job there doing a solo cabaret, which was much more jazz orientated. I'd written lyrics to Blue Monk about the loneliest monk in town. This poor monk who sang differently from everybody else. You know?
Yeah.
I wrote a thing, Here Are the Blues, which was a kind of parody of Ray Charles type stuff, you know. And it had all worked quite well. But while we were there, Spike came in one night and said, my mate Ashley Kozaks has just taken over as manager of Donovan, the folk singer.
Okay.
And he's got some new recordings, and he is looking for an arranger. He said, and Spike said to me, do you fancy you and me going in and seeing if we can work on it, you know? So we did, and in this real psychedelic purple, pre-psychedelia, but this place in Maida Vale, if I remember rightly, it was all purple with stars and glittery things. It's amazing.
Were you familiar with his material at that point?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, it was a jazz blues thing. I mean, I used to write history essays till 4 a.m. with John Coltrane live at the Village Vanguard playing. My neighbours must have hated me. You know, it hadn't impinged on my consciousness that the whole folk thing too much. But we went to the meeting, and in fact, Don started to play Sunshine Superman. And I thought, now this isn't like, you know, Bob Dylan,
right?
Tell you a story stuff kind of thing. And so, we'll do this. And we came up with the idea of starting it off with jazz bass, stand-up bass and bass guitar, which was John Paul Jones out of Zep.
Oh, yeah.
Bobby Orr was on drums. Eric Ford played guitar on the session, electric guitar on the session. I played harpsichord. Yes, and then Jimmy Page put on the guitar solo afterwards.
Jimmy played with everybody.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, it was the time when John Paul Jones and Jimmy were kind of right-hand men for people like Mickey Most, who was Don's new producer. So, of course, the damn thing didn't come out in the UK because of a contractual thing. And in those days, nobody in the UK knew what's happening in the US. I mean, we had a number one over in the US, and I couldn't get arrested, so I went back to what Alice and did pantomime. Next thing I know, bombs number one in the UK, and suddenly I'm working with Don all hours. I'm working with loads of people, and that then led me on to working with Julie Felix and Bobby Gentry on BBC shows. Yeah, suddenly I was a folkie from nowhere.
Wow. Well, let me ask you back to Donovan. He seems like, pardon the pun, but mellow.
Yeah.
Was he like that in real life, or is he?
Yeah, he's very laid back. That's his kind of persona thing. The great thing about Don is that he was always up for an experiment. I mean, all those recordings we did on the Sunshine Superman and Mellow Yellow thing. I mean, Bert's Blues, for instance, which was all over Queen's Gambit recently. The idea of having a blues harpsichord solo in the middle, and then suddenly it goes into a bit of Baroque woodwind and string quartet and thing, and then it goes back to being a blues thing, you know. He was up for that.
Right.
And Mickey, as long as with certain numbers, as long as the more kind of approachable numbers, like Sunshine Superman, stayed very approachable and were possible single materials, he didn't mind us going off onto adventures into different kinds of areas. Because having come down with a background of writing string quartets and jazz stuff and anything that came, I just loved the idea of melding all these things together, you know. And I think the great thing, what it did with Don, was it took him out of being like a Bob Dylan clone into his own sound vibe, you know.
That was my next question. Was what he was probably very conscious of that stigma,
yeah,
perhaps attached, you know, sounding like Bob. and maybe trying to distance himself from that.
Well, I think probably he did, and I think he was quite successful because suddenly he was acceptable in the States because he wasn't trying to be a Bobby Dylan, you know. I eventually ended up, I think, doing arrangements for the entire Bob Dylan songbook with Julie Felix because we did 39 half-hour shows with her, and I think she did every song that Bob Dylan ever wrote. You know?
Yeah, quite a singer, Julie Felix.
Yes, lovely,
Yeah,
lovely. Julie, a very good friend. She died last year, and
right.
we had an amazing 80th birthday concert with her a couple of years before, where you thought she could go on forever, you know.
Wow. Wow. Yeah,
But
and Bobby Gentry.
Bobby,
Look,
now she was something, yeah. I was just the musicianship. I mean, she walked in the room and you went, oh, you know. But then she'd get that little three-quarter Martin and start playing, and you were like, "Oh yeah, this woman can play." You know, it's
right,
funky and it's got that laid-back kind of Mississippi vibe to it. You know,
right, right.
she arrived with a full set of charts that we adapted for the show. And she knew exactly what she wanted, which
Mhm.
was, you know, was incredible for somebody of that era, especially a woman of that era, to actually have so much control just
Right,
through her personality and her musicianship. You know, I mean, and the fact that she kind of ran her own companies and all this kind of thing.
right. I think that probably the music industry wanted to pigeonhole her, as country, but she really wasn't.
That's why. Well, no, the trouble was that her record company wanted to make her more, I don't know, all-round entertainer, and
Mhm.
she didn't mind some of it, but she felt that she was being pushed in areas that she perhaps didn't want to be in, you know,
Right.
which was a shame. I couldn't believe it when she just disappeared off the map, you know.
Yeah. I know. Well, I wanted to ask you about one of the songs that you wrote. If I ever thought you'd change your mind.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And do you feel if once you wrote the song, if you matched it with the right singer and arrangement, that you had a hit on your hands?
I don't know. I just I had a great publisher in a guy called Jimmy Phillips
Mhm.
who'd been around for donkey's years and who tried to encourage me to write more than I did because I was so busy with arranging and TV shows. I didn't have all that much time to write. But the first recording of it was done by two guys called Edward
Edward's hand.
and
Yep.
George Martin directed, produced it, and then it was George that kind of said, right, I want to do it with Cilla, and in a way, it was slightly out of my hands, and which is also what happened with Sweet Inspiration, you know, which Cilla also recorded,
Right.
and next thing I know, there's Johnny Johnson and the Bandwagon doing it completely differently, and it's a
Right.
big Northern Soul hit, you know, which
About that song, Sweet Inspiration, were you ever approached by the Foundations? That sounds like a song that's just handmade for them.
yeah,
I
no,
don't
no, it's
know.
yeah. As I say, it was the Johnny Johnson thing. My favourite version of it is Dusty Springfield's,
Okay, I've heard that. I've heard that.
and it's just that sends me right over the top. You
Yeah.
know?
But I do like Edward's and version better. Any song with an oboe in it just does it for me.
Well, we had oboe on
Yeah,
Cilla's one.
Scylla's too. I think it just maybe the mood of Edward's and there's a little more moodier,
Yeah, well, it,
and the
it was
vocals.
it was written as a guy's song. You know,
Right.
it was about. I can't remember who I wrote it about.
I was going to ask you
Who's probably been married now for 50 years very happily. So we won't go there.
that. All right, scratch that.
Now, my favourite was Agnetta's version
Okay, okay.
because she kind of vocally got hold of it,
Hmm.
And we thought that was it. This was going to be global, but unfortunately, she had one of her attacks of, I suppose it's agoraphobia or whatever. I think she got to her front gate about to go out on tour and come and promote it globally, and went back again. And she
Wow.
just you know, never quite made where it should have done. But there you go, and we've got it there. You know.
That's right. That's right. You've always got that, you know. On one of Edward's hand, maybe it was their second album, Keith Mansfield played.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And that would be I was going when we got into KPM, I was going to ask you about you working with him. You worked with Keith quite a bit.
Yeah, well, we worked alongside each other quite a lot. I don't think we collaborated an enormous amount. He probably
Mhm.
played piano on odd things, and I might have played piano on odd things for him. But it's this weird thing where you have parallel careers to these guys, and I've seen quite a lot of Keith in the last few years when we've been doing the KPM All Star concerts and whatever. You know, I have to say he's worn very well. He's out of all of us. I think he's the one that's he's still got the picture in the attic. I think.
Well, that could seg into KPM, or would you rather talk about CCS?
Now let's talk about CCS. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
yeah. That happened in a very strange way. I'd been to see the Don Ellis band at Ronnie's, a big brass section, double rhythm section, a real battering ram of sound and whatever. And they used to do strange time signatures and things. They did one number. They said, we're gonna play a number in 13. And he went, okay. Anyway, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. You know, and it's like I pinned. This is when Ronnie's was quite a small club. Pinned to the back wall, you know. And I
13. Uh,
I went to Wayne Bickerton, I'd done the jazz album Off Centre with, and I'd done quite a lot of stuff with Wayne. And I said, I've got this idea for a big kind of funk band with a double rhythm section, etc. And Wayne liked the idea, but he took it to Dick Rowe, who said no. The fact that Dick Rowe had already said no to the Beatles made me feel a little more comfortable about it. So I was then working with Mickey, and I still got my folky hat on. We were going to do 6 arrangements for Mary Hopkin for Eurovision. The idea
oh, okay. Okay.
is that the public should decide which is the one that will go forward. And so Mickey and I had gone through all 6, and he said, so what else is new? You know, what do you fancy doing in the next whatever? And I told him about the Don Ellis band, and I said I'd love to do something where it's a kind of jazz funk feeling to it with the big brass section. He said, well, funnily enough, I've just signed Alexis Corner and Pete Thurup as a duo, and I'm looking for a vehicle. Should we have a meeting? So we had a
And
meeting.
what year was this?
1970.
Okay.
Yeah, so we had a meeting, and we and I had at Cambridge. I'd read quite a lot of Carl Jung, and I liked the idea of the collective consciousness. To me, the idea that musicians just pulled ideas from classical music, from rock music, from jazz music, from ethnic music, from all over the place, And I said, I forget if it was I came up with the title or between us of it being the Collective Consciousness Society, CCS. And Mickey said, fine, this is all great, and I love the idea I like the idea of the brass playing impossible licks and everything, but in the middle of it, I want a big Led Zeppelin type riff.
Right.
Okay, right. We can do that. Yeah. So that's basically how it came, and we started off doing things like Living in the Past and a whole lot of Love and Satisfaction in our way, and then of course started to write stuff like Tap Turns on the Water. We did Donovan's Walking. A band played the Boogie, Brother, and it was a blast. The only trouble was it was just too big to take on the road. Especially since it was a whole bunch of session musicians who were working their backsides off all it was still when session musicians did 3 gigs a day, 5 6 days a week, and you couldn't construct it on Logic with a few samples. You actually had to have musicians in the studio.
What about the positive reaction to the Zeppelin? Was there any lashback from hardcore Zeppelin fans? Anything?
No.
Good, good.
I did say to Jimmy Page after we did the concert with Donovan, where he played on about 10 years ago. I said, "You owe me, a whole lot of love," and he looked at me. The whole thing was, yeah. I think we were just we were appealing to a slightly different demographic, if you like. So there was actually always a bit of a link because, for instance, when we did the Albert Hall concert. With the band, we borrowed the Led Zeppelin PA. So because Mickey was good friends with Peter Grant, who was their manager.
Right.
So there was no animosity or anything. In fact, John Paul Jones played on Julie's 80th birthday concert. So he and I still chat away occasionally.
Very good, very good. Okay, let's move into KPM.
KPM.
Yeah. Where did this all begin? And when did you first get wind of it?
It has had its revolution by the time I got involved. I mean, the library music I gather, in the 50s and early 60s did tend to be what you'd call elevator music or wallpaper music. It was just like, play away and have a bit of mood and whatever. And Robin Phillips basically took it by the scruff of the neck, found people like Keith Mansfield especially, and revolutionised it. Had people write stuff that was like, whoa, that's a main title theme. It's not just washing away in the background. And at first, I was a bit snotty-nosed about it, and library music. And I'd started to do movies and all that kind of thing in the late 60s. Robin Phillips was Jimmy Phillips' son, or one of his two.
Okay.
So Jimmy said, I'd like you to talk to Robin, so I did. And in fact, I then discovered that actually it was rather fun. Certain things that I'd been working on from a more kind of commercial point of view, I could experiment with different ideas around those concepts. I mean, we sort of reached a point where, let's say I'd done a movie that was set in Berlin just after the war, and it was all very third man and things. We'd do a thriller spy album.
Right.
When we had CCS come out, I said, rather than let somebody else rip off our sound, why don't we do a big jazz rock thing, which was jazz rock, if you like,
There's a whole genre of that, the Italian detective thriller, movies. I've got a couple of CDs.
Yeah.
I prefer the more mellow stuff. But
Yeah. I mean, that's the stuff that seems to have had traction recently. Although I still love the idea of 5 o'clock earthquake or something that keeps coming up on Bob SquarePants, SpongeBob SquarePants.
Yeah.
Library music, I always say, is a little bit like children. You treat them as best as you can, and you try and educate them as best you can. Try to make them as good musically as you can, but you never know where they're going to go. I mean, Half Forgotten Daydreams ended up not just on Nespresso ads, but on the Emmanuel soft porn movies. You go, nothing to do with me. No.
You didn't push for that, right? No.
Yeah, I didn't. And then, of course, about 5 years back, my wife was going through the PRS stuff, and she said, "Have you written a thing called Like Whoa?" No. He said, "Well, we've got £5,000 from it, you see." So we thought we'd go online, find it. We found this thing that said Like Whoa, and out comes, was it the Liquid Sunshine? Flute, guitar, groovy pianos.
Yes.
And then suddenly this guy comes in and goes, "Sometimes I feel like a motherfucking postman."
It's wild. It's wild, all the samples, all the sampling that goes on.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah.
It's great because it gives us credibility amongst the children, but we can't play it to the grandchildren.
Well, speaking of have forgotten daydreams, that's how I was introduced to you, to your music,
All
actually.
right.
And it was from Nacho Libre,
All
that
right.
movie,
Yes.
which Jack Black, totally way out there. I mean, a song that would obviously somebody in production on that movie liked the song or what
Yeah.
have you,
Yeah.
but it really didn't fit. But I mean, not in a bad way.
No.
Same with a comedy like that,
Yeah.
the song like that. But then I had to research it and look into it, and then I found the compilation with other easy listening library songs
Right.
on it. But I have a YouTube channel, and I think I mentioned this to you before,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
that Half Forgotten Daydreams has three, no, 1.3 million views.
Oh.
It's,
Whoa. Hey.
it's the most of any song that I
Oh.
posted. 1.3
Oh.
currently.
There you go.
And it's just wild. A lot of the comments are goofy, about some of uh, scenes from the movie, but
Yeah.
then others are very. You could tell they're really enjoying the song itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
That's,
something else.
it is weird the way the whole thing's kind of gone round and come back again. The number of interviews or whatever podcast things I've done over the last during lockdown, basically, and it all seems to be about 1965 to 75, and you kind of go, I have had a career since then.
Right, right. Well, who was? Let me ask you, who was the female vocalist on that? The ba 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 ba. Do you
We
recall
used to
who?
use Norma Winston quite a lot. I used her on Psychomania. Or it could have been Barbara Moore. Barbara Moore did a lot of my vocals as well. As if there was a few nice young ladies that I used to use, but I can't remember.
Yeah. Do you remember the recording sessions for some of your
No,
easy listening? You don't.
not many of them. Yeah,
No.
yeah, I did. No, I do. It was a lot of them were at the old Lansdowne, and then moved to the new Lansdowne. A lot of them were in a basement in KPM. The rhythm section stuff like Swamp Fever and whatever, that was all done underneath the ground there somewhere. Just about.
Real swamp. Real
Yeah,
swamp.
yeah, absolutely. You've room to swing a very small cat.
What do you contribute to the popularization of that library music? These days, especially, a lot of people are retro, I guess you could call it. People are really going back and searching that music out.
I've got a theory that when we recorded Sunshine Superman in 1965, we did it on 4-track. It
Mhm.
was Don on vocals and guitar on 1, the whole rhythm section on 2, the harpsichord on 3, and the guitar solo on 4. By the time I was working for Heatwave and Hot Chocolate, we were on 48-track. So there was this explosion of technology. But it wasn't like technology now where if you get something and it doesn't quite work, you can go back and you can quantize something. You can put it in tune. You can do all kinds of cleaning up.
Oh yeah. But I think that auto tune thing has just ruined.
Oh,
Uh, I
I have
I've
to.
never.
I use it occasionally,
Okay.
but only on. You have to have a good vocal. You actually
Right.
have to have a good
To
performance.
begin with.
Yeah, to for it to do it. But I, when we went into the recording studio in the late '60s, early '70s, you never knew whether you were going to get a really good result or not. At the end of it, the producer might say, "Oh well, thanks guys. It was fine, but nothing particular." Other times they go, "We got a big smash, whatever." And I think a lot of what's stayed is the fact that you had to do a good performance, whether it was a library track or a rock track or a funk thing. You couldn't get away with, oh, we'll fix it in the mix. I think this is the vibe that was set up. I mean, by the end of the '70s, I was I was getting very bored with standing in a studio with a synth programmer and producer. So I'd try it on oboe, or let's try it on this. I actually used to do library sessions basically because it was nice to talk to the guys. How's the wife,
Yeah.
kids, and it was a good vibe to get in there. And we always used to get 20 minutes into our 3 hour session, right up to as the clock went to one. Doing right, finished, bye guys.
And there was less. Would you say there was less pressure on you guys too with the library sessions?
I probably was because we were
Yeah.
doing so many of them. Of course, we were young. It builds up later. After about 10 years or so, you start getting imposter syndrome. You think, do you think they'll find out that nobody actually taught me how to conduct?
Are there probably quite a few songs that are still in the vault? KPM, right? That have never been
Yeah,
released.
I don't know.
Okay.
I know I know that with the KPM 1000 thing, they
Right.
pulled out all the ones they thought were worthy. There's probably some stuff. I went through the Bruton stuff a couple of years ago. Basically, there were so many tracks. They asked me to just go through and say which ones I felt the most likely to be usable again, because I can't use all of them. Go away, bye-bye. There were some of them you thought, why did we do that? And that was good.
Life of Leisure is one of my all-time favorites.
All
You're
right,
familiar with that? Takes you away. You know?
good.
Maybe part of it too, the attraction is it harkens back to a simpler, maybe a simpler time, a happier time, maybe.
Yeah,
It's kind of an escape.
less complicated, less
Yeah.
social mediaized, if you like.
Right.
Yeah, and you were and you reacted and you fell in love and you had fun, and it was easy. But I don't know. Maybe the millennials. We got a bunch of kids who seem to be enjoying themselves.
Yeah. And then part of it too is just maturing when your musical taste mature.
Yeah,
When I was younger, I would like elevator music, that we called it that too.
yeah.
Yuck, now. But then as you mature and your taste broadens a little bit, start latching. I mean, good music is good,
Yeah, well,
regardless.
that's what my dad always said. What he used to say: "There's only good music and bad music. It
Right.
doesn't actually come into boundaries. It's good rock and roll and bad rock and roll, and good classical music, and but everything is everything." A very good friend of mine, Danny Thompson, the bass player, played with Pentangle. Great jazz bass player.
Yes,
Did
yes,
a lot
yes.
of stuff. Did stuff with Don. He had a band called Whatever, based on the premise that people would say to him, "What are you playing? You're doing a Bulgarian folk tune in 23/24, and there's no drummer. Is it folk? Is it world music? Is it what is it? Is it jazz?" He said, "Whatever." And that was the name of the band. And
That's great. That's great.
I mean, Danny was invaluable in things like when I was doing Path to 9/11, the ABC thing,
Oh,
and there was a lot of Qawwali music needed to be used, stuff from East African music, Afghan music, all this kind of thing. And Danny would know somebody that had roots there that we could phone up and talk to. He had a wonderful cassette I had in the car for years, where he was playing with a West African kora player and two South American guitar players, and the blending of the disciplines was just like mind blowing.
wow.
That's my vibe about music.
Yeah. Speaking of, this is off on a tangent, I know, but South African music, if you
Yeah,
ever go to a record store, all you see is the black music,
yeah,
which is great. But there was a whole group, of white rock musicians in South,
yeah, yeah,
you know, a Macaulay Workshop one
yeah.
that you never see.
No,
Very, very hard.
the funny thing is, I'm been doing something recently totally against type the other way, with
Uh-huh.
a black South African bass player, except he's a classical bass player, a virtuoso bass,
Ah,
who was in prison during apartheid,
Mhm.
whatever, and managed to get himself out and come here. I'm reintroducing him into Mingus and Pastorius and all the
Oh,
great funk and jazz
wow,
players, you know.
wow, wow.
And he's doing all this sort of baroque uh, bass playing and stuff.
How, how's he taken to it?
Right, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I find most musicians, once you get involved with them, doesn't matter where you're coming from. It's just a common language, you know.
right. Right. I feel like if we didn't have music, I don't know what this world would be, really. I mean, and I
Yeah,
think musicians understand that. It's just a soul and spirit. It's just, I can be in the worst mood and then listen to some music and it just uplifts.
yeah, yeah,
It's it's always been like that. I've got to have my music.
yeah, yeah. No, I see that absolutely. And during lockdown, we haven't stopped working on something that's going to be happening in the future. So everything's become very internalized, and just every now and again, I just stop and I go out to the living room and I find Radio 3 and just listen randomly. You know, rather than going to Spotify and say, I want to listen to some Shostakovich, I'll just, what are you playing? Oh, okay.
I mean, a huge collection of albums and CDs, and I'm always looking for the obscured stuff. The
Yeah,
good. And on my YouTube channel, I will only post stuff that's not on there. I don't understand people that are duplicating. They'll put a different version. They put the lyrics, same song. What's the point?
yeah.
I always post that's not on there, and then people will, you know, uh, reply and say, I can't find this on Spotify. And I want to say, yeah, that's right. That's the point. It's more obscured. It's harder to find. It's not going to be the real commercial.
I must admit, Spotify's been very useful recently. As a good friend of ours in New York, Mark Myers, writes a blog called Jazzwax every day. And it's very often about all quite obscure sidemen in the 40s, 50s, in the hard bop era, and then into the 60s and 70s and more. I mean, he covers the whole thing. He also writes about rock music, and he writes for the Wall Street Journal. But some of the recordings he suggests, you go, oh, I've got to try and find that. And quite often they're on Spotify. I don't know quite how Spotify have got
Yeah.
hold of these strange jazz albums from 1948 or something. But
Going back real quick to the KPM, Music DeWolf, was that like a competitor, or
it
did
was,
you ever
yeah.
do anything with
No,
DeWolf?
no.
Okay.
They were the direct competitors. Once Robin moved to Bruton from KPM to Bruton, I moved with him, and then when he moved to Music House, and then further on with Aaron, his sidekick. Then I moved with them each time. When they stopped, when Robin got ill and then he died, and Aaron kept going. I hung in with him for as long as possible, but I haven't had that great of a career in library music since then, because I think I got more identified as being part of the music theatre crowd, if you like. And I mean, it's been fun doing the KPM All Stars stuff. I've enjoyed that side of things, but not really had that wonderful personal relationship that I had with Robin and Aaron.
Right, right. Are
So
you do you mention composing and theater? What do you enjoy the most? Musically, writing material, composing, directing. What about theater? Did you enjoy or working in theater?
I enjoy working in theatre because it's live. You don't get a second chance with a movie. You can rework it or reshoot it or whatever. If you get out in front of a couple of thousand people, that's it. You either deliver or you don't. People sort of ask, "What's your favourite project?" And I usually
Right.
say the next one.
The next one, yeah.
Because it's always that thing. Yeah, At the moment, we're working on a piece basically totally delayed by COVID, which we're hoping to workshop over in Amsterdam in April. And it's, I'm not allowed to say what it's actually about, but it's set in 30s Shanghai with a lot of kung fu and stuff. And that's going to be a blast because we're working with a director, Vincent Patterson, who was the guy who invented the moonwalk for Michael Jackson.
Oh, okay, okay.
Vincent's a great choreographer, but he's also a great director of music theatre. So that's going to be a blast. But at the same time, we're trying to get a project off the ground or help the producers of a piece called Toilers of the Sea. It was the book that Victor Hugo wrote after Les Miserables while he was exiled in Guernsey, having fallen out with Napoleon III. And it's very much a piece which is a man against the sea. It'll probably only have about 35% of it dialogue. Most of it is big, huge visuals, which and big, huge music. You know, we can't do it any other way. It's almost like an opera for the sea.
Wow.
And so I'm really looking forward to that. So yeah, I love both sides of things. You know.
Yeah, I guess you enjoy the immediate reaction of a live presentation at the
Yeah,
theater, right? You know, from the audience, you get that feedback
yeah.
immediate.
We've missed it in the last 2.5 years. So we've been able to investigate our own heads, but not how it works with the world, which is
Right?
been a bit of a drag. But I'm looking forward to it all happening again. You know.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I was going to ask you too about do you enjoy or did you enjoy being in a studio,
Oh yeah, I love
recording in a studio?
yeah, yeah. Studio work is fun. The more live you can get into a recording, the better. Although I do a lot of constructing stuff on Logic and building up samples and sound design, the buzz of the piece is when we get in there with a live musician. I think I probably enjoy the discipline of the studio more than that of the theatre because with the theatres usually somebody else is conducting. I'm sitting there, thinking and mixing and writing and whatever. Whereas, when it's a movie score or a recording with somebody like Jose Carreras, it's me and the orchestra and the artist, which, I do enjoy. That's the buzz.
That's the which movies that you've worked on have you enjoyed working on the most?
There was a series of movies I did with David Wicks. There were movies for television. We did them for HBO and NBC and whatever. With Jack the Ripper, with Michael Caine, and then Jekyll and Hyde, also with Michael Caine and Cheryl Ladd, and Frankenstein. David was a great director, producer to work with because he'd always give me the script before they started shooting, and I'd feed
Okay.
ideas through to him even give him temp tracks to work to and this kind of thing, and it became very organic. So when we came to score it at the end, it wasn't something. Oh, what am I going to put on here? And it was something that we'd thought through all the way. And this is how I've been working with on the Toilers movie. So that's why I'm looking forward to enjoying that because I've worked with Andy Moran, the director, in creating a score in advance of the movie being shot, and I've been enjoying that. There's different ways. I mean, sometimes the buzz of somebody saying, I mean, when I did a thing called To End All Wars, it needed to be got ready for Cannes very quickly. I had the London Symphony Orchestra booked. I had 10 days to spot it and write it, and then about 2 days for it to be copied,
Wow.
and then it was a 45-minute score. And that was a blast because I had a really good music editor. You have a great music editor, you could work wonders. Yes, we hit the schedules and we got the damn thing to Cannes. It did help having the London Symphony Orchestra on it because they are supreme. You put something in front of them, you conduct, and they're there. They're right on the beat with you all the way. I've had some great studio
Yeah.
orchestras, but the LSO has that extra something.
Who have you enjoyed working with, throughout the years? You've mentioned a few.
Yeah, I
So,
did.
but just musicians as well as directors and
Well,
theater people.
I had a fabulous string leader for years, Pat Halling, who died last year at the age of 95, and he was still
Wow,
playing and still sailing his boat until you know till he
wow.
left us. And he was my right hand man for years. Um, those people I mentioned to you, Ronnie Rosses and Danny Mosses, and they were all around at the start. A couple of them still around as Tony Carr, the drummer, and Spike Heatley, but they're not kind of active in the world of music that much anymore. Um, I, there are certain sound recordists I'd love to work with. John Richards, who was the main guy at CTS for years, and I then worked with him on Little House on the Prairie in the early 2000s. He moved over to Los Angeles, and Chris Dibble was a favourite, or is a favourite of mine. Who was very much part of the whole Lansdowne setup with Adrian Kerridge, which was quite central to Robin and KPM. And it's just loads of music. I've mentioned Danny Thompson. Artist-wise, I think the nicest one was Jose Carreras.
Oh, really?
He was a really lovely guy. And little personal story, Barbie and I had Amy nearly 30 years ago. Who our youngest, we put two families together, and Amy then became the cement in the brickwork, if you like. And she had a pink teddy bear, a velour teddy bear that we left at home once when we went out to we had a place in France in the mountains, and she would not settle. And then we tried to buy her any kind of toy, whatever, and no, it didn't work. And in the end, we had DHL courier the teddy bear in the snow.
Really?
This guy, I hope this is important. Yes, it's. Yeah.
It's a teddy bear. It's a boy.
We bought two more teddy bears in case, and they became the three teddies. So we're out in Barcelona, and I'm doing some vocals with Jose Carreras on. I did 3 albums with him of crossover stuff, and Amy and Barbie came into the studio, and Amy's is about 3, something like that, clutching this teddy bear, you see. And Jose said, "Oh, hello, you're Amy. And who is this?" And she said, "Oh, this one's Placido." I said, "Oh, yes." And I've got one at home called Jose, and a very old tatty one called Luciano. Brought the house down. but Jose was so modest. He had this huge voice, this huge talent, but he would always say, "John, how do you think we should phrase this? How do you want me to?" He would work with musicians, and it was just an absolute delight to work with. I mean, and the other guy was Errol. I mean, we could talk about from one end to another. Errol Brown and Hot Chocolate, because Errol was just the nicest bloke in the world. And you'd do anything to get him a hit.
Does Amy still remember the teddy bears and the
I
story?
think she does. Yes, she lives in Fernie, BC, up in Canada now. After the Brexit referendum, she said, "My heart's broken. I'm going. Not staying here." You see, and went off. And she lives up in the Rocky Mountains and absolutely loves it over there. So
Wow, wow.
she was president of snow sports when she was at uni, and we used to have a place in the mountains, and I think she just wanted to get back to the mountains. So
Yeah.
we ended up in BC,
There's a lot of mountains up there, and then northwestern U.S. Yeah.
Oh, I know. It's the town she's in. It looks like the set for Fargo, but ringed with mountains.
Oh, wow.
All these 19th century bank buildings and things, and strange little bars and whatever. And then I don't know how many mountains. Probably 2 of which are inhabitable, or
Yeah.
they ski on. The rest,
Yeah.
it's the moose and the bears, and there's nothing there apart from wildlife.
Have you been to visit her there?
Yeah, we went 2019. We were booked to go 2020 and 2021, and we got cancelled by the airline both times. They just weren't flying
Oh, yeah.
there.
Oh, yeah. I enjoy history too. Do you think if you hadn't gotten into music, you would have perhaps taught history or
I'm not a very good teacher. I mentor young arrangers at the Royal
right?
Academy of Music, a music theatre course, and on that level, I can help people, and I can write a piece for youth orchestra and go in and help them play it. But I don't think I've got the right mindset to actually teach people ABC, whatever. What it has done is given me a historical perspective on a movie score I'm working with, or for instance, when I did Hamlet, I did music for Hamlet for the National Theatre with John Caird, with Simon Russell Beale, and John decided to set it in the court of Denmark at exactly the time when Shakespeare wrote it. So we researched musically what would have been played, and we came to the conclusion that an Italian composer called Orlando de Lasso was the composer du jour at the time. So we based everything around that, and we took Lasso's music and deconstructed it and reconstructed it. And I'll use a historical kind of diagnosis of something to get to the bottom of a character, be it Jack the Ripper, or something like Witness for the Prosecution, which I did in the early 80s with Ralph Richardson. It was his last piece, where it was very important to get the vibe of post-war London. It's a way of approaching things which I'm glad of the historical process that I've been through, because I think it's always helped me in that most of the things I do have some connection historically or socially or to real events.
Yeah, I think the musical score is so important in any movie,
Yeah,
especially a good score. It just creates that atmosphere that
yeah. I was talking about Jack the Ripper earlier. Um, that was very much based on what was current. We made sure that nothing that was played in a bar or whatever was written after 1888, and the music that turned into horror music started off as a piece of Victorian sounding orchestral music. Then it could turn into the horror. In fact, that was the first film that I started to construct my own synthesizer or sample things with all the big murders. I multi-tracked my daughter screaming in different pitches,
oh, really, really.
and then I
Oh,
found we'd replaced the garage door, and I got this big metal door hanging around in the back garden. So I got a crowbar and a Walkman tape recorder, hit this big old door with it, and recorded it, and layered it up with all these screams. Put it on a Prophet 2002 synthesizer sampler. Put it on a keyboard, and so you kind of, but instead of that, you got pow. So, which was rather powerful. And a friend of mine came round one evening when I was working on the score and had a studio out in the garden. And he popped his head round the door and he said, "Are you coming down the pub?" I said, I won't be a minute, I'll just finish this mix." And he leaned over and hit the key of the on the keyboard, the one that had the scream on it.
yeah.
I don't think he ever recovered.
Freaked out, huh?
I said, "You shouldn't have hit that key."
He's he probably he probably had nightmares for
Oh yeah,
days after.
absolutely. Yeah. But no, that was when I really started to think about, I'd used a certain amount of technology on the first Les Mis score, the one we did in Paris in in 79 and 80, using CS80s. But the the Ripper score was the one I really found the blending of sound design and orchestral, which is, I've been using ever since.
Well, what what projects or movies or any work that you've done have you been the most proud of? Would you say that's really you hold close to you?
It's difficult to say. I mean, there's a piece I wrote called Missa Celtica, and I recorded it with the English Chamber Orchestra and the Choir of New College, Oxford, with whom I'd done some recordings for two albums called Agnus Dei 1 and 2 that were best-selling classical albums. The Gramophone gave me some award or other. And Missa Celtica was actually a cantata based on the travellings of Irish poets and writers and people like Columbanus and Columkill and Aidan through north of Ireland into Scotland, across to Northumberland to Lindisfarne, and then they travelled all the way down through Europe to Bobbio, where they set up a monastery there, and it was a story of how Irish and Celtic culture had flourished while England was pretty well 100% illiterate. It was Anglo-Saxon. Just a few people read or wrote. And this amazing flowering of poetry and writing and whatever was happening all around us. We actually went to St. Gallen in Switzerland and visited a library where it has an enormous amount of first millennium manuscripts of Irish stuff, of all sorts of first millennium manuscripts, illuminated manuscripts where somebody had written in the corner in Old Irish, "My hand is cold," and then a haiku, all in Old Irish, the monk, and suddenly you were like, "Whoa, I'm there."
Right.
8th century,
Yeah. That's what I love about history. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was magic, and I mean, it had some recognition at the time, but if I want somebody to listen to something that was what I really felt like doing at the time, it's that. I think actually to go back to this thing I was telling you about with Danny Thompson, the thing I'm most proud of is having made connections with so many different sorts of musicians and so many different genres of music, and most of them have felt valid, really meant something to me.
Right. There's a certain kinship with music,
Yeah,
and artists in general, I would say.
I mean, it's weird because when I was at Cambridge, yeah, if you were going to become a classical composer, you had to write serial music. You had to write like Schoenberg or Albenberg or whatever. And I kind of I enjoyed writing serial music, but I thought there's a huge world out there of lots of music. I don't actually want to be pinned down to one thing or another. And I suppose in a way, if you'd have said to me in 1965, look, you're going to have an up and down career. It's going to be some moments of glory. You're going to be in New York when Les Mis opens and runs for 30 years. But you'll have bits where people don't like what you've written, but you won't stop working for the next 55 years. I'd have gone, done.
Exactly. Where do I sign?
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you, kind of going full circle though, what did your parents tell you about when you were born? You said during a bombing. I didn't get to interject at that time, but did they have, I'm sure they had some stories about that
well,
during the
my mum said I was Hitler's revenge. I was born a month late. My dad was in the RAF, and I think that was the time he flew home to see me,
Okay.
and got somebody to fly him in a Mosquito, just hedge hopping totally illegally, to come and see this newborn chap. Norm. I called my parents Norm and Doll from about the age of 11. I wasn't into this mummy and daddy thing. Well, they were musicians, and so was I. So he was one of those people in the RAF who perhaps wasn't a fighter. He organised concerts and kept the morale up, designed posters to keep people on the straight and narrow, and he had a completely different war. I mean,
Yeah.
he was in the thick of it, but he was the musician in the room. You know?
Well, see, coming from America, I mean, being in America, which I mean, we've never been physically attacked,
Yeah,
where we live, except, like the 9/11
yeah,
in one city. But to go through an experience like that, I can't fathom what it was
yeah.
like for the.
Well, this is weird. We've been talking about it. How life has been disrupted by COVID in the last 2.5 years. But then we talk about our parents who were in the war and went through it. I mean, you start your life like that. I mean, all you want to do is have a nice lie down,
Right, right.
something.
You
They,
know,
they all started their lives in that totally chaotic way, and I know.
and then it just, yeah, you just don't know where life is going to take you.
Yeah,
You
no.
really, really don't.
We haven't been complaining too much about the COVID. We've had it easy.
Yeah, yeah. Did you have your shots?
Oh, I'm vaxxed to the max. And I've had the flu vaccine. Whatever's going, I have it.
You know, I know it's like my flu shot. It never works
No,
for us, so it's like we stopped doing it. We did it
no.
2 or 3 years ago, but me and my wife, we get a little touch of it
Yeah.
anyway. So what's the point?
Well, I must admit, since I've been having the flu shot, I used to have about a month of around about January of kind of
Mhm.
bronchial, horrible, but
Yeah,
I've had nothing since. So
yeah,
I'm a
yeah.
great believer. There you go.
So speaking of COVID, I'm sure the Alone Together project was,
Oh yeah, I just said
from that. Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
was fun. Yeah, I mean, that we really enjoyed the first lockdown because we went out and we shot vids and did some recording with friends all remotely. Um, and I lost a few kilos of weight and got fit. And then the second time, it started to get boring, and
Right.
we kind of lost the impetus. The good thing is that we've kept the interest in the projects, the Toilers and the piece out in Amsterdam, and also we did a trailer for a musical that I've been involved in called Ruth, which is about the last woman to be hanged, Ruth Ellis in Britain. It's quite a dark story set in the 50s, but it's very much
Wow,
London
that's
in the 50s.
very interesting.
And we've been making a trailer, and I've suddenly started to discover how to cut vid and do sound effects and foley's and and do all that stuff. So that's kept us on the straight and narrow since then. But finally, we're starting to get out of it, which is people are actually talking about let's do a workshop, let's do this, thank goodness, because it was starting to get boring.
Right, right. Do they still, is it mandatory wear masks there still,
Well,
or has that been
I'm not sure, but
lifted?
I do anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
Most of the shops here still want you to, whether it's not. The trouble is, we got this chap in charge who seems to make it up as he goes along. So we'll all have some fun now. Let's just all go out and get pissed together. You think, help?
Well, I think they must be related, our president and what our, maybe they're brothers from a different parents or something. I don't know, but we get that, yeah, very similar kind of thing here. It's like, what do you believe? What do you listen? Who do you listen to?
Yeah, I know.
That kind of stuff. But so you kind of mentioned what's keeping you busy these days, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and your family life.
Yeah,
still going?
we've raised 6 kids between us, and there's 8 grandchildren. The trouble is they're scattered halfway around the world. There's one family in Singapore, Amy's in Canada, uh, one of our daughters is up in Scotland, and some over the west of England, east of England. I mean, that's been the great thing is that Zooms and Skypes and you know social media, little WhatsApp things digging around the family has actually kept us
Yeah.
sane.
I mean, that's the good side of the technology.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, my son, who's 16, mentioned he'll be coming to London with his choir.
yeah, yeah,
It's so funny about technology, and I don't remember. It was one of his classes. The teacher was showing them the dial phone, the old
yeah.
dial,
Oh,
and
oh, yeah,
how
yeah.
many of them didn't know how to dial. It's like, okay, you you put your finger in with the number, yeah, and go around. It's like, how do I call?
But the thing is, in the States, you've had ding, 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 push button phones for even longer than us.
Right, right, right. And
Yeah,
it's just how spoiled they are.
yeah,
Truly,
totally. Yes.
truly. But it is good we have this. Well, I guess that kind of we're winding down. Unless do you have something else you'd like to add, or
No,
uh,
I think we've kind of covered lots of bases.
yeah, yeah. Has it gone okay for you?
Yeah, yeah, it's been great. Yeah,
Okay,
yes,
well, good. I mean, like I said, I'm new to this.
yeah,
With the written side, I've done several of those.
yeah,
This
yeah.
is my second video. But would you like to play something for us? Maybe something you've been working on, or to kind of go out with that?
That's some of the music out of Toilers.
That's very pretty, very pretty. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of it will be played on Elan pipes, Celtic fiddles, and all that kind of thing. It's a very kind of Celtic feel to it.
Oh yeah. I love some of the old. Well, that was very, very beautiful, very pretty.
Good, thank you.
Look forward to hearing more and
Yeah,
from you in the future. Keep doing what you're doing.
sure, sure.
You haven't slowed down any, have you?
No, 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 no.
Yeah, no, no. But I like the story of your 95-year-old that was still sailing.
Oh
That's the way to go. That's the way to
yeah,
go.
yeah. Pat Hanning. Did you ever see the All You Need Is Love live broadcast that the Beatles did on?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
He was playing lead violin on that.
Oh, is that right? Okay,
Yeah,
I'll go back and watch that. I'll go watch that again.
he led the violins and all the hot chocolate things. That the I Believe in Miracles. That's Pat. That's Pat and
Ah,
Laurie.
okay.
Yeah, the funny thing was I had another string section on the very early Julie Felix stuff, and I fell out with the fixer on it. He didn't like the idea that Danny Thompson came back to England, having toured with Donovan, with a cowboy hat and dressed like a cowboy. He said, "It's not the way you come into a session." So I said, I'm going to find another fixer. I'm sorry. If you're going to tell me how. And it was the first Bobby Gentry show. And I walked into the BBC bar to find my new string section sitting there. And they had a bottle of champagne between them and Lowenbrau's chasers. So I thought, I'm in trouble here. But actually,
Wow.
they were
Yeah, sounds like it.
they were a bunch of hooligans, but by God, they played well. You know, they had a lead cellist called Francis
Yeah.
Caparo, who was just amazing. You know, and they stayed playing my stuff for decades. So I owe a lot to those guys.
Wow. Excellent. Excellent. Well, yeah, you know had a very nice career and you know continued success and everything to you. Uh, yeah, it's I know lots of people out there enjoy your you know what you've done and
Good, yeah. How
a lot
well?
of people, you know,
But we
some
continue.
that you'll never hear about.
Yeah, yeah.
But go ahead.
The other thing that has been really gratifying has been around about 2010. I did a lot of work in Eastern Europe, in Croatia, in Vienna, in Ljubljana, places like that, and met a lot of really nice musicians and whatever. And in 2013, we went out to China and put on a production in Wuhan, of all places, of a piece called Nils' Wonderful Adventures, which is actually a Swedish story, with an all Chinese crew, cast, and everything. The only people who were Westerners were the designers and the director and myself. So that was a blast. I mean, and this is one thing that has brought me into the project we've got out in Amsterdam is the fact that you know, while I was there, I learned so much about Chinese music that you know, that's now going into the piece in Amsterdam. I love the idea of just bringing stuff from. It's the collective consciousness thing.
Right, right. You know, kind of like a big melting pot too.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, I mean, why not?
absolutely, absolutely. So,
You know,
so that's captures young. You know.
yes, yes, it does. It surely does. And you know, you still have a very sharp memory. What do you do to keep that memory going? That
Well,
memory so sharp.
yeah, we've got children who I can have a discussion with and you know, disagree,
Right.
argue points out with. You know, our daughter in Canada will say, "Dad, you can't say that."
Mhm.
You know, and the guy in Singapore will be a little more. He went to Oxford. You know, we can argue points out. He wears a suit and goes into a bank and head of global financing for Standard Chartered for projects. So I get the other side of from him. You know, we got
Right.
another kid who's an aircraft engineer. And somebody else who teaches special needs children, and there's a choreographer in there. Lots of people to interact with and just talk to.
Wow.
You know.
A wide array. And I work crosswords
Oh right, I can't do.
to keep my mind. You can't do them?
No, no, I could do the dead easy ones when I was a kid.
Well, I have to admit, I cheat every once in a while. I look at the answer.
Oh, right.
Some
No,
of them I can't. I can't.
I'd go there too quickly. That's the problem.
Right, right. Okay, well, John, really appreciate it. Thank you for doing this and taking the time out uh, to visit.
Well, I
Uh,
hope you can cut a nice thing out of it. If we could take the ums and the ahs out.
the that I was doing more of that than you were, I think. Yeah, okay. Well, best wishes to you and
It was great. Good to meet you. And
yes,
give our love to.
good.
Whereabouts in Texas are you?
We are like a suburb of Dallas, kind
Oh,
of, sort of, sounded like northeast
yeah,
of Dallas.
yeah.
A place called Wiley. Have you heard of Plano? Plano, Texas.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay, we're just kind of directly east of Plano.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so there you go.
Give our regards to Texas, Plano, or wherever. Oh,
Okay,
wherever.
I will. All
Okay,
right, thank you, John.
and you. Cheers.
Okay, all right, cheers.
Cheers. Bye.